Hey, this is the Antisocial Socialite back at it again. Shout out to all the wonderful new subscribers and returning friends. Welcome, welcome, welcome. If you are new to the channel, you have not yet subscribed, what are you waiting for, darling? Hit that subscribe button, smash that notification bell, so when I get to running this mouth, baby, you are in the loop. You see the title, you know what time it is. We're going to discuss the whole Cynthia G bringing a white man onto her platform, conversation, dialogue. I'm going to give, a little breakdown of the points. I'm not going to play the video because that would already make it quite long. That video was about 35 minutes. And so to add on commentary, it's going to take a little while. But I did jot down a number of notes as I went through and listened to this this dialogue between this man allegedly called Brian. Shout out to Jessica X. It seems that his name is actually something else, and there was a little Freudian slip in there. But okay, whatever. Cynthia G did an open panel chat, whatever, where people could call in, and this man who was allegedly white called in. He made a number of points. I wouldn't say he was wrong on necessarily everything, but what I will say is a lot of his arguments, they were just regurgitated talking points from the divestment community, the colorism, swirl community, and a lot of it was actually straw man. There were a lot of straw man arguments in there. I'm going to try and highlight some of them. So let's get straight into the first point that he made, which is about Tariq Nasheed perpetuating the victimhood narrative with the buck-breaking movie. And at one point he went on to talk about how no one alive today was alive during slavery. This is a common argument we hear from people who try to brush the impact of slavery under the carpet. Now, obviously, for people who come from Africa, that's not going to be such a big deal or a big impact for them, because at the end of the day, people from the continent do have more of an intact culture. They have food, they have dressing, they have religion, they have language, they have a flag. Shout out to Mr. Research. All the things that give you cultural identity. People from Africa often have that very much intact, and they're very proud of their heritage. And so when they come to the West, I do believe after a couple of generations, they will struggle to retain that identity. They'll start to experience an internal culture clash where they like some aspects of Western culture and they still want to hold on to their cultural identity. I will say this, there are some black people who do spend a lot of time overly talking about the impact of slavery and white supremacy. Like literally everything is chalked up to slavery. And to me, white supremacy and slavery are not the same thing. Slavery obviously was a period of time where black people didn't have any rights, they didn't have any opportunity, they were very heavily controlled and policed. Whereas white supremacy is systemic. It's a case of every area of human activity, black people are often disadvantaged. It's kind of like setting a person up and then leading them towards where you've set the trap for them. That's why I often say white supremacy sets the trap, but black people choose to fall into it. The reason why we have these conversations about white supremacy is because when you understand that it's operating in the 9 areas of human activity, things like employment, legislation, education, socioeconomic things, the way we interact with each other in love and relationships, white supremacy does play a hand in shaping the black community in a way that perpetuates dysfunction. So I can understand why people, anybody, black or white, would have an issue with the buck-breaking movie, because let's be real, we have had a lot of slavery movies and narratives put out there, and that does help to re-traumatize black people and also to make them feel fearful about the future because they feel like they're still being oppressed the way they were during slavery. White supremacy is a lot more subtle, and it's more of a case of mental slavery than physical restrictions and physical restraints or segregation. Unfortunately, when people subscribe to a defeated mentality in the sense that the white man always has his foot on my neck, that actually makes you so mentally enslaved that you go right into the very traps that have been set for you by white supremacy. For example, we talk about the prison industrial complex, but people don't just leave the womb and go straight to jail. There is something that happens in between. So when white supremacy, for example, is helping to keep black men, for example, out of certain jobs and positions, the education system is disadvantaging black boys, that means there's going to be a shortage of eligible men able to compete and eligible to raise and secure a family. If you have a low income as a man, your wife is more likely to have to work, which is obviously going to mean that the children are either left unguarded or they're going to be shuttled from various activities and left with different family members. Maybe they're plonked in a dodgy daycare or something. They're not getting the best environment and the most stability that would lead to productive offspring. And then, as I recently was talking, if you have a married couple and both of you make similar income, there's kind of like a penalty for being a married person, because if the two of you are working, you increase the amount of tax you end up paying, which means people who are married are actually penalized, despite the fact that not only are they married, which is a good thing, but they're also both working. So it's kind of like a double blow to think that you're doing two things that in essence should be productive, but ultimately financially you come off worse. And it's kind of like a triple whammy, because if the both of the parents are working, who's actually raising children? It's not just about sustaining them, it's actually about raising them, investing time in their future, investing resources and extracurricular activities and just their emotional development. That's not going to happen if they're spending significant amounts of time alone or being raised by people who don't necessarily have their best interests at heart. We know that black children spend the least amount of time doing homework, and they also spend the most amount of time watching TV. So all of this is going to impact how they develop, and it increases the amount of chance of them actually going into the streets, getting into crime, and eventually ending up in the prison industrial complex. So this is just one way that white supremacy operates in a multitude of areas of activity that funnels black people down into the system. Okay, so I can understand why people would say Tariq Nasheed's movie kind of helps to perpetuate that narrative, but calling white supremacy out and identifying where it's operating is not the same as using it as a crutch or an excuse. So Cynthia G went on to say that if black men are oppressed by white men, it's because they're letting it happen. Again, there's a degree of truth to that, because white supremacy is not slavery. The way that you could get away with abusing black people in the past, it has to be a lot more subtle now in the modern day. And if you have the right mindset and the right foundation, you can definitely overcome white supremacy. As I've said before, white supremacy is kind of like lift and gravity. When a plane is flying, gravity still exists, but obviously as long as you're propelling the plane forward, gravity cannot really bring the plane down. It's only when something happens to the momentum of the plane that unfortunately the law of gravity is higher than the law of lift, and that's going to bring the plane down with a kind of a bump. Okay, it's the same thing with black people in the West. If they are getting the right kind of support, and I'm not talking from outside of the black community, I'm talking about within the black community. If they are getting the right kind of support, if they are getting enrichment in their homes, obviously mothers are the first teachers, and women decide the environment under which their children are raised. And so with that being said, if the home environments are good and enriching, and the children are being educated, taught to read, write, have basic arithmetic, and they're going to the best schools, they're living in decent areas, the chances of them being able to compete is higher. Having two parents in the home significantly increases the chances of socioeconomic progress and growth for children. So when we look at the environment in which these children are raised, we can see who is more likely to actually go forward. And we know that 70% of children in the black community are raised in households where the parents are not married. Even cohabiting is not as stable as married parents. But again, we've got that taxation, penalization for married parents, because not only are black women just as likely to work and earn close to their man, sometimes they earn more, but also they pride themselves on working. They pride themselves on going out and competing in the male space. Whereas women of other races are more likely to look forward to quitting their job to stay at home and raise the children, gradually ease themselves back into part-time work, and then once the children are grown, go into full-time work. So black men are not really complaining about being oppressed the way Cynthia G would like to portray it. In fact, her entire platform before was talking about white supremacy and systemic racism. So I find it kind of ironic that she would kind of say that black men are the ones complaining about oppression, but complaining, using it as an excuse, and highlighting the way that black men are discriminated against are two totally different things. Then we had the usual straw man argument that black women are the most educated, and by now everybody's supposed to know that this really is black women are the most enrolled, but they don't necessarily finish their courses. And we also know that black women often go into things like humanities, where they have this huge amount of debt once they finish education, but they don't even have a job that will enable them to cover the expenses of the degree. Why is this problematic? Number one, people don't really want to take on someone that's got a lot of debt. People understand, when I marry you, your debt becomes my debt, your issues become my issues. So if you've got huge amounts of debt that you can never really pay off because you're working in a field that doesn't allow you to pay off the debt, well then obviously the partner you get has to be willing to pay it, and that's going to scare a lot of people off. The other thing is this: a lot of women are so desperate to prove that they can compete, they would rather put off dating and finding a partner in order to try to work to pay off that student loan debt. So they prolong settling down, which means by the time they do claim to be ready to want to marry, they actually don't have a lot of options available to them. They've aged out of the dating market, which means that there's slim pickings out here for educated women, hence why we have the whole I'm a PhD kind of joke going around. People are literally marrying their education and their jobs, and they're using that as a substitute for a spouse. Okay? So then it's like black men are pushed into the submissive role. Again, this is a huge straw man, because women are the ones emasculating their own sons, coddling them, not making sure that they are getting around masculine men. This is how black women operate as gatekeepers. The next aspect of the manipulation is obviously Juneteenth has just happened. So he's talking about, we're in a time of empowerment. Why would you want to bring a negative narrative like butt breaking to the table? Again, this is part of the straw manning. This is part of the drawing the black woman in by making out as if this brother really cares about Juneteenth. Again, Juneteenth is one of these gestures that are put out there, platitudes that are put out there for black people to kind of subscribe to, where you have a symbol but you don't actually have any real tangibles. There are no changes being made for the betterment of black people. An official holiday, another day when you're not working, is not what black people really need. The things that black people need are obviously programs. They need laws to be changed that are going to make society fairer for black people. You want investment, you want enrichment. Obviously you have things like gentrification, but gentrification actually pushes out the most disadvantaged, and unfortunately a lot of those people are going to be black. So to kind of say at this time, why would you want to kind of cast a shadow over this happy time, which is Juneteenth? There really isn't anything happy about Juneteenth, okay? And then, he went on to say black women are doing everything on their own. Again, this is perpetuating the narrative that black women are suffering and struggling on their own. Again, black women don't have to do everything on their own, and unfortunately they are the victim of their own choices. You know, black women, unfortunately, a lot of us suffer more under the consequences of our own actions than anything outside of the community, or even things at the hands of our own men. Because a lot of the complaints that black women have on social media are actually about the men that they chose. So it's not really about somehow being oppressed. We're oppressed by the consequences of our choices. Okay? But then he makes a huge big deal about how white his wife is, and how, you know, he's a man called Brian. He doesn't know anybody who's black called Brian who speaks as well as him, which of course is kind of like the, oh, you know, you're so well spoken for a black person type of jibe, you know. That there's a lot of slick dissing and low-key disrespect throughout the entire interview or the discussion. Despite the fact that you think he's praising black women, he's actually taking a lot of low-key shots at black people in general, including black women. So he's like, my wife is whiter than white, and this is something that Cynthia G later on wants to go into about how, you know, non-black men don't mind dating black women, and you know how they think about them. You know, Brian has a lot of praises to sing for black women, yet despite how highly he holds them in esteem, he seems to still end up with a white wife. So it's like she wanted to then bait him into the conversation about, do white men want black women? And we know the statistics show that black men and in the 90s were dating out at around 3 times the amount that black women were. It was around 4% of black women, and around, you know, 3 to 4%, and it was around 9%, 8 to 9% of black men were dating out. Now we know that it's around 25% of black men and around 12% of black women. So the ratio has shrunk. It's 2 to 1, or for every one black woman dating out, 2 black men are. But that still means 75% of black men are with black women. And you know, a lot of people like to complain that black men just want white women, but only about half of the black men who date out actually are with white women. Women from, you know, Hispanic or Latina backgrounds, intercultural dating, as in dating other, you know, from other parts of the diaspora, are more common than black men actually getting white women. Okay. And then he takes a shot at black men, saying that they're a nuisance. Some people are saying, well, maybe this is just an environmental thing. If he lives in an urban area where you're going to have a variation of demographics, you're going to have maybe affluent people living quite close to low dem areas where you have a lot of these projects and problem areas. And he was very dismissive. He was actually quite annoyed that he called the black men a nuisance. Okay, and so this lets you know what's really in his heart, how he truly feels about black people. He sees them as a nuisance, but because it's beneficial to gas black women's heads up, he can get more information and feel valid or justified in his contempt for black men. You know, it's like the enemy of my enemy becomes my friend. And it's going back to the whole conversation about imagery. How do black people look? How are they perceived? How are they treated? If you have black people engaging white people in and really putting black people down, when those white people go, or non-black, whoever they are, go back to their community, they will feel justified in being disrespectful, because they know that the black people do not have the other side of the community to go to. It's kind of the same thing with swirlers, women who choose to date out, you know, women who choose to date out and then they slander and speak very dismissively about black men. Their non-black partners know that this is a woman who can't go back to the black community. She can't go back for a couple of reasons. She has disdain. She's spoken very negatively, which meant she's probably burned all her bridges. And at the end of the day, even if she did go back, a lot of people wouldn't accept her back because of the way she spoke about them. And so this actually opens the door up for them to be abused by non-black people, because they feel justified and they know you don't have a lot of support. Okay, well, if you're a swirler, you'd have to turn to other black women, and even then they will brush it under the rug. Black women are more likely to stay with non-black men who are not treating them right anyway, so it just is what it is. Okay, and obviously problematic behavior amongst men today in general is to do with the feminization of men. Be in touch with your feelings, use your emotions, think like a woman, do domestic tasks. The whole of society is being engineered towards the feminine, and so men in general are becoming more passive. They're less aggressive, they're less assertive in a controlled and beneficial way. Men who are not allowed to express their true masculinity, they will express it in dysfunctional and damaging ways. They will be aggressive and assertive, but for the wrong things. And so we do have masculinity, but it's obviously been corrupted because they're trying to force femininity onto men who have a masculine frame to some degree. Okay, so then he said, black people call me all kind of derogatory names like Mayo, and Cynthia G's face kind of dropped because she knows she's insulted white people quite heavily to the point where they kind of wanted to get her taken off the internet. Originally, she was going hard on white people to the point where they're calling her racist and making response videos to her. And she's like the albinoid devil, and the Caucasoids, and the people of no color. I mean, she had all kind of dismissive and derogatory names for white people. So for him to sit there and at one point even say, I don't mind, it's like, I'll take this shot, I'll take this disrespect, because at least now I have an opportunity to say how I truly feel about black men without being called a racist. I mean, if I was to sit in the congregation or a group of black men and say these things, they would literally rip me a new one. But because I know I'm in the company of friends where we all have disdain for black men, I can just blatantly, come out and say whatever I feel like and know that to a degree I'll be protected. And so that was a little bit, it was embarrassing to say the least. It was a number of sad things. Okay, so then he goes on, black women are intelligent, and black men want partners, and things like this. And, he said black men don't intimidate him physically, mentally, financially. Black men are not a threat. Again, this is a very leading question. It's embarrassing to ask a man, are you threatened by another group of men? No matter how much you're oppressed, no man is going to say yes. So it was already a foolish question to ask, because anybody with an ounce of pride is not going to say yes. Now, to me, he laughed nervously because deep down he knows that they are a threat. And actually, at the end of the interview, he confirmed that yes, black men would be a threat if they worked harder. At the end of the conversation, Cynthia G asked Brian about education. He kept reiterating this thing about the education. Why? Because black women make so many videos and they have so many comments about how important it is to be an educated black woman. So the entire playbook has been left open on the table for anybody of any race to pick it up and feed you the narrative you want to hear. So he's like, oh, I really appreciate the fact that black women have good conversation and they're so intelligent, and I can speak to you and you can understand me and I can understand you. And then he went on to say, black men don't value education. Again, shout out to Jessica X, she brought it up. Shout out to Kwame Brown, people like BGS, Dr. Tia-San Johnson, Tommy Curry, all of these professionals and content creators and scholars, they have all been coming out and drawing a huge focus on the fact that black women are failing to teach their own sons to read. This is crucial because even if you do not have the time to sit down and read with your child, you can at least buy books that will encourage them to educate themselves. Reading stimulates the brain, it opens up the vocabulary, it helps you to formulate sentences and structure, it brings on your language. There are so many benefits to reading, and obviously how will you learn if when you get textbooks you can't understand them? So black women are disingenuous about the role that they play in sabotaging their own sons, and this is one of the biggest straw mans of the entire conversation. And so when he says, black women can compete with white men, well, this is music to the black woman's ears, because in a lot of cases, many black women are desperate to be accepted and validated by white people. Then he said, traditionalism, Cynthia G is complimenting him on how traditional he is and how, they have patriarchy. But the reality is this: black women do not want a functioning patriarchy, because black women are the ones that often talk about wanting a partner, and when they talk about the attributes of a husband, they never talk about leaders. They say they want the man to take the lead, but really and truly what that means is, I want you to be held responsible if things go badly. That's not the same as following somebody's lead with trust that, they're competent to get the job done. A lot of black women, that's not what they're looking for. That's why when you ask them about what kind of man, they say a provider and a protector, because that's beneficial for them. But they're not looking for somebody who's going to direct them and check them and lead them. A lot of black women complain about 50-50 partnerships, but they are the ones who are engaging in a 50-50 lifestyle, because a lot of them are not looking for men and making themselves into the kind of women that a man who can take care of all of the bills and pay the cost to be the boss would want. They take pride in being able to be the earner, equal or even greater earner, because that gives them control. It gives them leverage in the relationship. So when Cynthia G says black men don't understand how traditional black women are, a lot of the things that black women do culturally or co-sign culturally, they're not traditional. So how you work out that black women are the most traditional, that doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. So then he went on to talk about his marriage. And he said, well, maybe marriage is different for black people. Again, here we go with the slick dissing. Here we go with the disrespect marriage. I understand that there are different things that, people like within their marriages. Maybe one husband is vegan and another husband likes steak 3 times a week. But those are superficial differences. What actually matters is the woman submissive, cooperative, feminine? Is she a good homemaker? Is she a good nurturer of children? And is the man dominant? Is he a leader? Is he protecting and providing? This is just what a marriage is. If you have a man who is leading, protecting and providing, he is in his masculine role. If the woman is following, she's being cooperative, submissive and building a home, she's in her feminine role. So color has nothing to do with a functioning marriage. Women want to feel loved and men want to feel respected. That's just the standard blueprint. So why would you say to them, well, maybe marriage is different for black people? And it's just like, this was an irrelevant and a stupid statement to make, because how can marriage be different just because your skin is different? The reason why marriage is different in the black community is because black women, despite getting a lot of proposals, Kevin Samuel's show has shone a huge light on this, that many black women claim that black men don't want marriage, but most of the women who call into that show when asked, have you been proposed to, will say at least once, many of them on multiple occasions by different men, which begs the question, why are you in a relationship with somebody for so long that it got to a proposal, but you still couldn't accept the proposal? Like, why were you in a relationship for that long? Are you saying that, you met on Monday and he was proposing by Friday? Obviously not. So why stay in a relationship for so long to the point where the man said, let me drop to one knee, only to then say, no, I know I've been with you for years, but I don't think I can actually marry you. That doesn't make any sense. And again, this is that slick dissing, that's that disrespect. Like, this is where his superiority complex really shines through, because you're trying to say that white marriage is better than black marriage, as if there's 2 different types of marriage. It's the same institution. It's the institution of a husband and a wife raising a family and building something together. What has skin actually got to do with it, apart from tradition and culture? And tradition, and culture, you can say maybe in Africa you do it one way, in Asia you do it another way, but there are some fundamental basics that are universal across the board. The only reason why in the West black marriage is different from white marriage is because the black community is a matriarchy, whereas every other cultural group is more patriarchal. And so everybody knows their traditional gender roles and they stay within their gender roles. They know their marital roles and they stay within their marital roles. In the black community, you have a matriarchy, you have role reversal, and you have women who want to dominate in the relationship. They want to be the leaders. They want to be the final decision makers at worst. I don't know if it's worse or best. But then at the other side, they want to be partners. They want to equal. They talk a lot about being equally yoked. It's not about complementarity and it's not about polarity, because where women often are weak, men tend to be strong. So you're bringing the two sides together to complement each other so all the bases of the household are covered. It's only in the black community where that is not truly understood. So there's no difference between black marriage and white marriage. Your white marriage is not superior to black marriage. Marriage is marriage. But because there is a gender reversal in the black community and you have a lot of liberalism, that's why marriages don't get off the ground. If you do get up the aisle, they don't tend to be successful because of that constant power struggle within the relationship. Okay, so he said, and then, he completely triple talked. He didn't even double talk. He's like, oh, well, maybe black people do marriage differently. Then he went on to say that, I only get married, marriage makes my taxes easier. Again, this is a statement that doesn't really make any sense, because if you were cohabiting and you had one income on the books and you have a woman living with you who doesn't work, she's the mother of your kids, and you guys are living like husband and wife, it's just she's not on the books, she's not working, she's not paying any taxes, your tax would be very easy. And this is why even white couples, they benefit from marriage, because if you have one breadwinner and one homemaker, the person who is the homemaker is maybe not being taxed. Maybe they run a little business from home. Maybe they do some cash in hand work, plaiting hair. Let's just say it's a black couple in this instance, plaiting hair, doing nails. Maybe they've got an online business. They're self-employed. They work part-time, or, they do a YouTube channel, something like this, where they have streams of income coming in that's not really being taxed. Okay, on the books, it looks like one person is living here. Even a married couple in this situation where the husband is the primary breadwinner and the earner, and the wife is the main recipient, but she doesn't really pay taxes, that married couple is going to pay less taxes. So you have children that are being raised in stability, you have good money coming in, it's not being taxed as much because there's only one earner. So you have the benefits of the patriarchal system and the legal system and the tax system and every other system you can think of. The opposite is the truth in the black community, where you have black women earning about the same as black men. They're both competing to work or whatever. The children are off the rails. I mean, it was just the most ridiculous statement. And not long after the words left his mouth, I only get married for the purpose of making my taxes easier, then he went right back into saying, but we know that marriage is the best environment for kids. So which one is it, Brian? Did you get married so you could have an easy time with the taxes, or because you actually understood this was the best environment to raise children? Okay? So it was just a ridiculous statement to make, and it was just some complete double talk. But again, this is how, if you tell black women what they want to hear, you can have them eating out of the palm of your hand. He went on to gas her up more about the pressure of raising children. Of course, if you choose a Dusty to have a baby with, or if you know that you choose to marry before you carry, then you're going to struggle. That's the bottom line of the situation. If you choose to marry before you carry, you are going to struggle. And that's not a surprise, because we know the majority of people living in poverty are women, even when they have children. For the same reason we talked about earlier, to do with education and the types of jobs women go into, they're just not high earning jobs. The highest earning jobs are STEM, and a lot of black women, or women in general, just don't want to play those games. And obviously she had to ask the question about single mothers. This is a very common question that these divestors and swirlers, they like to ask because they know it's a huge bone of contention. And he went on to say that obviously black men are the reason why there are single mothers. He then tried to virtue signal his little heart out, talking about how much, you know, he wears condoms even with his wife. And it's like, he himself probably doesn't want more children, and that's fine. But you have to understand, two people make a baby, but the ultimate reproductive control is with the woman. She has over 20 forms of birth control. She can give a child up for adoption. She can give the child to the father if she carries it to term, or she doesn't have to carry the pregnancy to term. If you are in the West, unless you are snatched off the street and held in a basement for 9 months, you are not forced to have a baby. Even if you are assaulted and you believe you could be pregnant as a result of that assault, you can go to the hospital, you can get morning after pill, they offer it to you. So this notion that black women are made into single mothers because they are, you know, having sex, a lot of the time black women disingenuously try to insinuate that sex equals pregnancy. But you can have sex as much as you want, obviously not from a Christian standpoint, but you know, we're talking about in the secular sense. You can have as much sex as you want if you have your birth control on point. So this notion that it's the man's responsibility to manage a woman's womb, again, it just was a straw man argument. It makes no sense, because if you have a handbag, a house, a car, you wouldn't expect somebody else to look out for those items. And I feel like because the womb is something you can't see and it's free, black women feel like it's not their job to manage it, but it's your job to manage who enters your body. And obviously after sex, it's your job to make sure that a pregnancy doesn't occur, because the pregnancy, a lot of women that I speak to online, they actually try to use pregnancy as a way to spite black men. They actually use pregnancy as a way to spite black men. And the thing about it is this, even if you have that baby, you are now tied to that man for life. Even if you have that child, you have the risk of physical complications. Obviously your body's not going to be the same. You may gain weight that you'll never take off. You may have stretch marks and things like this. Your life is in danger. It's like, why would you put yourself in the position to be compromised? You know that once you are a single mom, for example, you can't work as much, because if you're the only parent in that house, how are you going to go to work and care for a child? Your income is going to be significantly cut just because you couldn't work as much as you could as a childless woman. You're going to be stressed, depressed. Again, he started to play on her emotions about the stress of raising children alone. But the thing is this, if black women wanted fathers for their children, they would make sure that that was a prerequisite before they laid down with the man. You cannot have a baby and then expect that man to turn into dad of the year. If you want men who are going to be protectors, providers, they're family orientated, there's an order to do this. And he's trying to make Cynthia G look like a victim. Again, it was ironic that the conversation started with the victim narrative, but the whole single mother conversation is one giant gaslighting victimhood fest, because really and truly women control who enters their body and if the pregnancy occurs. You have injections, you have implants, you have coils, and the thing about it is this, you have non-prescription or non-medical forms of birth control apart from condoms. I'm talking about for women that you can use in conjunction with other types of birth control. So if you're using 2 birth control techniques and the man is also using condoms, you've reduced the risk of pregnancy and disease down to pretty much 0. So this idea that black women are not in control of their sexuality and their reproduction is ridiculous. But again, it's another way to take a shot at the black man. And so it's like black women are the victims of these men. And in a lot of instances, you know, shout out to Nick Cannon. Nick Cannon is notorious for producing children that he's not going to be consistently in their life. Yeah, he's got money, he can fly the kids out, he can see them, we can video call, but it's not the same as having that father in the home every single day. And Nick Cannon at the moment, I believe, has got multiple women pregnant at the same time. And these women are aware. So as much as Nick Cannon is like a breeder, yeah, he running around, you know, slinging that thing everywhere, the women are lining up for this. The same with Future, the same with NBA Youngboy, and the same for a lot of these men who have multiple children with multiple women. They even know that this man has got children that he's not taking care of, but they still go and do the same thing. And I'm not going to bring up Cynthia G's, you know, misdemeanor, but I've seen videos where, you know, people are kind of alluding to it. There's a video out there where she says basically, this friend I haven't seen for a while, so she doesn't know if I'm still pregnant. So people speculate, did she have the baby or did she have a termination? But at some point, Cynthia G was pregnant because it came out of her own mouth that she was pregnant. So, you know, the rumors are out there. Yes, she's never acknowledged it or admitted it, but she's never denied it either, and neither has Robert Perkins. Okay, so then he tried to make a little funny move where he said more white people are on welfare. Yes, there are a higher number of white people who collect welfare, but there are not, but percentage-wise, there are actually more black people on government assistance. So again, when he tries to make out like white people are doing worse than black people, he's being disingenuous. He knows that, say for example, you have 90 white people and, you know, 9 of them are on child support or benefit, whatever, not child support, some kind of welfare. That's 10%. Now, if you had 10 black people and 5 of them were on welfare, although the physical number is smaller, 5 compared to 9, the percentage is higher because it's 50% of the black population. So he's being disingenuous in that black people are actually receiving more government assistance, and that's obviously because of the high out of wedlock birth rate, and because a lot of men are not skilled, so they're probably having to claim some type of government assistance just to survive. Half of the population of black people who are in poverty are women, so even women without children are struggling to make ends meet. Then he came out with some more victimhood rubbish about black women fighting in World War I and World War II. And this is where, you know, black women are talking out of both sides of their mouth. They're very contradictory, because people like Chrissy will complain that black women are on the front line and they're the face of combat, and they're the face of fighting with their men. But Cynthia G is gladly taking up this mantle and taking up this cape of being the strong, independent woman who's fighting alongside her man. And that's, again, just not the case. I mean, I don't know how many women fought in the world wars. I know that women in the UK, which is obviously white women for the most part, they stayed back and they kept the country running. They produced ammunition, they worked the farms, they worked the industries and the factories. They made sure that the troops had all of the resources that they needed, but they weren't actually in combat. So this notion that the black woman was fighting in the war, I don't even know where he got that from. But if you say so, I don't think so, because I don't really remember seeing that many women fighting in the war. And then he brings up Planned Parenthood, which, you know, is obviously a very big sticking point, because we know Planned Parenthood centers were specifically dropped in the black community as part of the eugenics program. So although he's talking about men going to Planned Parenthood to get condoms, we know he's subconsciously sending out this message to black women that if you have a pregnancy for a man you don't really want a baby for, just go and have an abortion. Okay? So that was another load of rubbish. So further in the interview, he said that black people were socialized differently. Again, this is a slick diss and some low-key shade. Again, it just shows you how disingenuous these women are, because who is socializing the children? The mother's the first teacher. So if black men and black women, black men and white men, or black men and non-black men, operate with a different mentality towards family and relationships and children and things like this, which actually they don't, because when it comes on to thinking about a child's future, I hear more black men thinking about the future than black women. But okay, let's just say for argument's sake that's true. Who is the one raising these children? 70% of children are born out of wedlock. We know at least half of those children are being raised by single mothers. And so how are they being socialized? How are they being spoken to? How are they being invested in? What kind of role models are before them? If they're not having the same kind of socialization as men of other races, why are you shocked that they don't turn out like men of other races? And what I'd like to ask black women who have an issue with this is, seeing as you want to compare black men to non-black men, why don't you compare yourself to the women of other races as well? Why are you not trying to see what women of other races are getting right so that you can also produce the same results within your own men? And the answer is simply this: black women fear being surpassed and actually being suppressed by black men. So they make sure that they sabotage their sons early so that they will never be able to compete with black men. The whole thing about building the community and building black men and the shortage of eligible black men is nothing more than a smokescreen. The women talk about wanting to build a community, but when you ask them what do you do to actually build the community, they then go straight to things to do with black girls. And we saw this very clearly when Ice Cube did his whole, contract with Black America, and basically the ladies from Cocktails and Queens tried to tear him apart, saying, well, what did you have in the contract specifically for black females? Again, this argument doesn't make any sense, because why would you want something for black females if black females are already doing better than black males? Seeing as you claim the black man is the weakest link, why would you not shore up and strengthen the weakest link? Instead, you focus on the one that's already allegedly doing better. So why would you do that if you really cared about there being more successful, accomplished black men? Then there was another one. White men don't talk about white men don't talk about white women the way black men talk about black women. This is another erroneous point. This is another straw man argument and a falsehood, because by now everyone's supposed to know that there's a white manosphere and they go in very hard on white women. MGTOW has been going for about 20 years now. It's been going a really long time. You've had the men's rights movement. You've had men coming out and speaking against the fact that it's not fair that they can't see their children, or that the laws are disproportionately stacked against them. And afterwards, the black manosphere evolved out of the white manosphere, because black people realized they had some unique issues that they needed to address that white people just couldn't understand. Even you, Brian, you can't understand. So this disingenuous argument that white men do not critique their women, it was the first time I heard the phrase a bastard baby maker, it was a white man. Give the children to the father. I heard that from white men. White men talking about abandoned women and get dolls, it's all white men. Men going and getting surrogates, white men. So this notion that white men do not have platforms where they talk about these things is just false, because a lot of people know in this space Tom Likas. Tom Likas has been on the radio critiquing women in general for decades. So again, why do people like Cynthia G lie about the fact that white men are as critical of their women as every other group? And let's just keep this all the way 100. If you go outside of the black community, especially the further east you go, if you want to act the fool as a female, you'll just be in a box. I don't understand why people keep playing this dumb game that black women are the most oppressed. Because if you ask black women, which group of women would you like to swap with? They will never pick a group, because every other woman on this planet is under stricter conditions than the black woman. There are certain places in the world you'll be flogged publicly if you're even accused of things. You'll be stoned. You'll be whipped. Your husband can beat you, and in some places they don't play. They'll just honor kill you. They will just take you out for misbehaving. And we're not even talking about just the East, and we're not just talking about the Islamic world. There are parts of Europe. I was looking at news in Italy. Men are killing their wives, and domestic abuse is a huge problem out there. So even in the West, in certain countries where the men have a lot of free reign over their women, the men are really knocking 7 bells out of these females. So when you hear black women complaining that you don't hear men of other races complaining about their women, that's because they know how to deal with their women. If those women get out of line, they're only going to get a few chances to do that before they're no longer be able to get out of line, if you get my drift. So this disingenuous conversation about men of other races was absolute rubbish. Okay? As I said before, we're talking about this idea of men being sexually irresponsible, but we know 50% of black men in the States do not have children. Around 30% are married. So the vast majority of men are being sexually responsible. It's only a handful of men, under 20%, who are being sexually irresponsible and having all these children out of wedlock. But again, even if these men are sexually irresponsible, sex does not automatically equal pregnancy, and the woman has complete control. If she has a slip up, she can get the morning after pill, and obviously there's plan C. And if you don't believe in abortion, you can give the child to the father, you can give the child up for adoption. I'm not a fan of adoption because I feel like a lot of the children, they go into the care system where they end up being abused. There is a high ratio of children that leave care and go into crime. So that's not going to be positive for the community either. But if you're complaining about being a single mother, then you have to think about your womb and protecting it before you engage in sexual activity. And then, you know, he said something. She asked him about his children. He started talking about his children, and he made the statement, "My kids are lovely, intelligent, and beautiful. That's why I want to be around them. And like after working a long day, I want to spend time with them." So this is another subtle slick diss. What are you saying? That black children are hideous, stupid, and ugly, and that's why men are not taking care of their kids? I mean, the fact that she didn't seem to see how much he was really low-key disrespecting her, it was mind-boggling. But okay, whatever. So black men don't want to invest in their education. We've covered this already. How can black men feel enthusiastic about being educated when they're not being supported at home? Okay? They break the chain of education, and even studies have shown that when children are raised by a single mother, it's much easier to convince a single mother about the care for her child when she goes to the school. Single mothers are less likely to feel competent to stand up to teachers when the teachers are saying things like, "We need to take your child out of class, your child is problematic." The parent is more likely to take the side of the school and whatever they suggest, she's going to do it, which means it's easier for the school to funnel these children into special ed and disadvantaged positions. Whereas a father would come down to the school, and more than likely he's actually going to challenge what the teacher has to say and say, "There's nothing wrong with my child. Maybe you need to increase your ability to teach kids. Maybe you need to give them more work or give them better feedback and things like this so that they can improve." Okay, so the whole education system is geared towards women. I've discussed this numerous times, that the education system is not geared towards men. Mixed schools are not conducive for males to learn because they're coming into puberty. The girls are dressing very provocatively now. They're coming into school with the makeup, with weave, with dragon claw nails. They're looking like Instagram models. It's just a distraction in and of itself. And then on top of it, you want males to sit down for a long period of time. That's just not going to work for them to learn. Males learn better in all male environments. And so if you want young boys to actually progress, it's better to put them into an all boys school. At least that way they can compete with other males instead of competing with girls, or competing with other males for female attention, which takes them away from their studies. Okay? So he said if black men were interested in education, they wouldn't have it so hard. But this is not really true, because the education system is not designed for males in general to succeed. Another misconception that she brought out was people are calling him a simp, and it's obvious that he's pandering to Cynthia G and just basically regurgitating all of her talking points. But this is another thing that a lot of these female content creators like to use. They like to misrepresent the word simp. They like to tell their subscribers that the word simp is a man who likes to take care of a good woman or his woman, and that's never been the case. Simping is putting a woman on a pedestal, not holding her accountable, and not making her earn your respect or trust. You're basically doing too much for somebody who hasn't reciprocated that same sentiment. That's what a simp is. Any man who is going above and beyond for a woman that he doesn't even know is committed to him, this is an act of simping. So him talking about how much he loves his wife and cares for his wife and he loves his family and things like that, this is a misrepresentation of the word simp. And there were some other things about black women being traditional, and obviously, no video would be complete without an attack on Kevin Samuels. Obviously, she must be losing sleep and see him fast approaching 1 million. Congratulations to Kevin Samuels, he hit it yesterday, so well done to him. She must have exploded when she saw that K turn to a M, and it just is what it is. You don't need outside detractors and haters when you've got people like this in your own community. Everybody remembers the infamous video where the 3 women came up and they were like, I know that black women don't act like they belong to black men, and we don't want to smile, and why should we build anything with you and everything. And he said it right there and then. You don't need to worry about the white man in the street when you've got black women in the community who are sabotaging the community like this. So the fact that he threw out some kind of homophobic slurs, again, he knows he can do that in this space. Cynthia G asked about Kevin Samuels. I've seen Asian people and white people build a ton of content on what Kevin Samuels has to say. He's gone to Vlad, he's obviously he went to No Jumper podcast, which is run by, a white guy and black guys. He's got a mixed audience. A lot of white people and white men resonate with what Kevin Samuels is saying. So this idea that white people are not interested in what Kevin Samuels is saying is rubbish, because people all over the planet are taking notice of what Kevin Samuels is doing. And then he's like, black women are hardworking, and, if I want to provide for my family, go and clean. Now, this is something I personally have said myself, that if you're in a financial bind, you can't have pride and be broke. You've got to pick a struggle. Either be financially stable or work. Going to a menial job, cleaning, security, stacking shelves, fast food restaurants, there's no shame in that if it's legal money, if you're able to provide for your family. No one's asking you to stay there, but a lot of black women would not want that even if you were making good money, because it wasn't that long ago that black women were tearing down blue-collar workers, even though the bulk of the money is actually in blue-collar trades. You don't need a formal education. One of the reasons why men are not going for formal education is because there's no job guaranteed at the end. You may have a degree, but there's no guarantee you're even going to want to work in the field once you get the degree, but you still have the debt, versus going into a trade school or going into the armed forces, where you leave with skills, you leave with a good pension plan and a lot of benefits, and you can come back into society and start up your own business. Why would you go into years of education and debt with no guarantee when you could just start working? So a lot of men are not going into university, not because they don't value education, but because a university degree is not the only form of education you can get. And that's why the average earnings for men is higher than women, and that's why overall men make more money than women. Because men do trades, they do STEM jobs, the highest earners are still men. So once again, the fact that you have a degree and that you're the most enrolled is irrelevant, because if you're not able to make money once you've got that certificate and that debt, what's the point of actually going and getting the certificate and the debt? And the last point is, black men are not raised to be leaders. A woman cannot raise a man to be, a woman cannot raise a boy to be a man. And so this whole idea that somehow you can look as a black woman to men of other groups as leaders, the society is set up that men of other races, they have patriarchal power. When there's a disturbance between a white man and a white woman, they're more likely to take either side or give the man a lenient sentence or be lenient on him, compared to the woman, like a domestic disturbance. Whereas the black woman can always use the system against the black man. And so the white man has never been oppressed the way black men have been oppressed and victimized. And so to say that the men of other races make better leaders is foolish, because the other cultures, as he said previously in his own spiel, that they're socialized differently. So part of the socialization of men of other races is to be patriarchal and to be leaders. You don't see women of other races competing with their men to the extent that you see black women trying to be partners with their own men. So everything about this conversation was convoluted double talk. And what I will say in closing is the whole thing is a huge embarrassment. Seeing black women fawning over a white man lying about pretty much everything from start to finish is embarrassing. Black people on a victim narrative, that's not good for our mental health. Are black men perfect? Obviously not. But at the end of the day, the way that black women frame the conversation, you would think that they had no part to play in the destruction in the current state of the black community. And I just find it sad that black women are so desperate to spite black men, they would actually turn to the people who claim to be oppressing their men to get support, guidance, and an actual validation. It reeks of so much desperation that I find it sad to see. And to think that somebody like Cynthia G was so critical of the white supremacy system, it just begs the question, did she ever believe anything she ever said? Because the more you learn about white supremacy and how pervasive it is, the more you would think she would have disdain, not necessarily to hate white people, but to be like, I need to keep you at arm's length because I know that in the past you've never really done anything good for us. Like, even if you do something good for black people, you did it because there was some benefit to white people on the back end. So why you would actually not give this white man pushback? But if a black man challenges what you're saying, you're quick to call him all kind of dusty and, dusty logic and trash bag logic. And, she asked the question at the end, can black men be high value? And this is what really nails Cynthia G's, whole argument to the wall. Because a lot of the time when black people or, black men and certain black women criticize black Cynthia G, one of the first things they'll say is she's not talking about all black men. But she asked the question, across the entirety of black men, is there such a thing as a high value man? She didn't say, do you think there's such a thing as high value man in the black community? And then give some parameters. And Brian came flat out and said no. Initially he said no, black men are not white men are not intimidated by black men, and black men are not going to be able to compete when it comes on to competing with black men. And that's where I think he said the bit about education, and black men would be able to compete if they were interested in being educated. Okay? And if Cynthia G really wasn't talking about all black men, at that point she would have said, well, you do realize such and such amount of black men are in the middle class, or this amount of men are in education. or the number of black men incarcerated is falling, she would have actually interjected and said, so you don't think even da 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 da, and given him an opportunity to kind of put some parameters. When he said, no, I don't think a black man can be high value, she was dead ass quiet, which lets you know, no matter how much black Cynthia G says, I'm not talking about all black men, she actually is. And for the black men that support her, you are an absolute disgrace and you're an embarrassment. I feel sorry for you. I wish you would go and remove your testicles from Cynthia G's purse. That sounds really harsh to say, but when she is out here talking about, if I was pregnant with a black male child, I would have an internal struggle because I would have to think twice about giving birth to a black male. Although on the next hand, black women will say there's a shortage of black men and we outnumber black men by millions. Well, obviously, if you're aborting them all, what did you expect was going to happen? It doesn't make any sense. But the black men who enable these women, you're more dangerous. You're part of the gynocratic rule and a drone for these women, and they hate you as much as they hate the so-called dusties. To them, all black men are no good. They're all dusty. So thank you, Cynthia G, for finally coming out and saying that when you talk about black men, you mean all black men. It doesn't matter how much you talk about not all and you say not all. The fact that you ask the question, can a black man be high value, if you claim to not be talking about all black men, let everybody know you are talking about all black men, irrespective of how much they've accomplished. Because in your mind, Cynthia G, it doesn't matter what that man has done. As long as he is challenging what you have to say, in your mind, he's a dusty. So that's all I've got to say on this one. I really appreciate everybody who came through. Let me know what you think in the comment section, what I got wrong. Let me know if I missed anything. Share the video with somebody who needs to see it. Like, subscribe, dislike, share, comment down below. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.